The massive alien vessel hovered above the United Nations Plaza in New York, its shadow casting darkness over the crowd of government officials and military personnel who had gathered for the judgment. Commander Jack Harper stood at attention, his weathered face revealing nothing, though inside his heart pounded with rage and helplessness. Beside him, his wife Dr. Olivia Palmer gripped his hand tightly, her knuckles white. They watched as the holographic image of Counselor Zexus Tara, an Arconian with blue-scaled skin and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, addressed the human delegation. "The Galactic Council has reached its decision," the alien announced, its voice translated into English with an artificial flatness. "Humanity represents an unacceptable risk to galactic stability. Your species exhibits aggression, unpredictability, and a disturbing rate of technological advancement. You have advanced from primitive combustion engines to rudimentary space travel in less than 200 of your Earth years." President Samantha Powell stepped forward, her gray suit crisp despite the humid summer air. "Counselor, we have demonstrated our willingness to abide by Council regulations. We have shared our scientific discoveries openly. You have done what was expedient," Zexitera interrupted. "Your diplomatic overtures are transparent attempts to gain access to Council technology. Your history speaks for itself, human. Your kind cannot even maintain peace among your own nations for more than a few decades." Jack shifted his weight, fighting the urge to speak out. 2 years of negotiations, and it had all come down to this. The alien armada positioned throughout the solar system made any resistance futile. "The Council's verdict is exile," Zextara continued. "Humanity will be confined to the Orion Spur region. Quantum barriers will be established to prevent access to the galactic hyperlanes. You may keep your current colonies on Mars, Europa, and Titan, but may not expand beyond your current holdings." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the human delegation. The Orion Spur was a backwater, far from the resource-rich core systems and major trade routes. President Powell's voice remained steady despite the sentence. "And if we refuse these terms?" The alien's upper eyes blinked slowly. "Then instead of exile, we offer extinction. Our ships are positioned to sterilize your worlds. Choose quickly." Jack felt Olivia's hand tighten further around his. As chief physicist for Earth's Defense Force, she understood better than most what the aliens were capable of. "We will comply under protest," President Powell said finally. "But know this, humanity will remember this injustice." Zexitara made a gesture that the translation software identified as dismissive amusement. "Barely evolved primates with delusions of grandeur. You will be forgotten, human. The Council has spoken." The hologram flickered out. Above, the massive ship began to ascend, rejoining the fleet that hung in the sky like artificial stars. Jack turned to Olivia, whose eyes were fixed, not on the departing ships but on her tablet. "What is it?" he asked. "The quantum barrier technology," she whispered. "Our sensors gathered readings during the announcement. Jack, there's something unusual about the dimensional variance. It's not operating on principles we expected." He glanced around, making sure no alien observers were within earshot. "Can you explain in simple terms?" Olivia's eyes lit up with the spark that had made her the youngest department head in EDF history. "They're not blocking space itself, they're shifting phases of reality. It's actually more elegant than brute force, and potentially more vulnerable." President Powell approached them, her security detail forming a protective circle. "Commander Harper, Dr. Palmer, we're gathering in the underground facility in 30 minutes. Bring whatever data you've collected." 6 hours later, 150 of Earth's top officials, scientists, and military leaders huddled in the government bunker beneath the ruins of old Chicago. The facility, built during the resource wars of the 2130s, was one of the few places guaranteed to be free of alien surveillance. President Powell stood at the center of the circular room. Tactical displays showed the alien fleet deploying the promised quantum barriers at key positions throughout the solar system. "They've given us 2 weeks to recall all ships beyond our current colonies," General Rita Sanchez reported. "Any vessel not inside the barrier by then will be destroyed." Jack studied the room. Instead of defeat, he saw determination hardening on faces around him. "They think they're cutting us off from the galaxy," Powell said. "In reality, they've just removed all constraints on our development. We no longer need to worry about adhering to Council technological standards or cultural taboos." Olivia stepped forward, projecting her tablet's display onto the main screen. "The quantum barriers operate by shifting space into a phase state that prevents normal matter transit. But look at this energy signature. It fluctuates. There are patterns here that suggest the technology could be adapted, perhaps even reversed." "How long would this research take?" Powell asked. "Years," Olivia admitted. "Perhaps decades. But it's a starting point." A young naval officer, Alan West according to his nameplate, raised his hand. "What about the colonies on Mars and Europa? They were designed to be dependent on Earth." "We accelerate self-sufficiency projects," Powell replied without hesitation. "Every human settlement becomes a fortress of innovation. They think they've sentenced us to a slow decline into irrelevance. Instead, we'll use this isolation to rebuild and rethink everything." Jack stepped forward. "Madam President, with your permission, I'd like to form a special projects division. Small teams working on technologies the Council would never permit. We know their weaknesses now. They're arrogant, complacent, convinced of their superiority." Will nodded. "Make it happen, Commander. Dr. Palmer, you'll work directly with the science teams. Priority 1 is understanding and eventually counteracting those barriers." As the meeting continued, Jack noticed Olivia working furiously on her tablet. He leaned over her shoulder. "Another breakthrough?" She didn't look up. "Maybe. What if the phase shift isn't just a barrier? What if it's a door? They're keeping us from their reality phase, but what if there are others? Dimensions they don't monitor because they don't know they exist?" Outside the bunker, night had fallen over the rebuilt Chicago skyline. Citizens went about their lives, most unaware that humanity's future had been decided hours earlier. News would break tomorrow, carefully managed to prevent panic. 1 month later, President Powell addressed the combined population of Earth and its colonies. Her image broadcast to public screens on 4 worlds. "Citizens of Earth and her colonies," she began, her voice firm and clear. "Today marks 1 month since the Galactic Council sentenced humanity to exile. They meant to break our spirit, to condemn us to obscurity and eventual extinction." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "Instead, they've freed us from playing by their rules. Today I am announcing the Prometheus Initiative. Every resource, every mind, every moment now serves one purpose: to ensure that humanity not only survives but thrives. The aliens believe they've written the final chapter of human history. They are wrong. This is merely our first page." In a laboratory deep beneath Olympus Mons on Mars, Olivia Palmer watched the speech on a small screen while her team worked behind her. On her display, the first successful simulation of what would eventually become the phase drive pulsed with possibility. The aliens had meant to trap humanity in a cage. They had no idea they had instead unleashed something beyond their comprehension. 20 years passed since the Alien Council exiled humanity to their small corner of space. The quantum barriers still stood at the edges of the Orion Spur, glimmering with energy that reminded everyone of their prison. Yet behind these walls, humanity had been far from idle. Alan Garcia wiped sweat from his brow as he adjusted the final connections on the prototype engine. At 42, he had spent half his life working on what was once Dr. Olivia Palmer's wild theory. Now that theory stood before him, a machine unlike anything humanity had built before. "System check complete," said the lab's AI assistant. "Phase drive is ready for test sequence." Alan nodded to the observation team behind the thick glass barrier. Among them stood an aged Jack Harper, now Admiral of Earth's growing defense fleet. Beside him was Danielle Wright, whose innovations in resource extraction had transformed the supposedly barren worlds of human space into productive colonies. Initiating test in 3, 2, 1. Alan pressed the activation sequence. The machine hummed quietly, too quietly for something supposedly capable of bending reality. Then the test probe at the center of the chamber flickered. For a split second, it seemed to exist in two places at once. Then it vanished completely. The room erupted in cheers. Alan checked his instruments. The probe had reappeared precisely, at the target coordinates 2 kilometers away, having moved through what Dr. Palmer had first called phase space, a dimension that existed alongside normal space, but operated on different physical rules. Admiral Harper's voice came through the speaker. "Congratulations, Dr. Garcia." She would have been proud. Olivia Palmer had not lived to see her theory proven. Cancer had taken her 5 years earlier, but not before she had established the theoretical foundation for what would become humanity's greatest advantage. "This changes everything," Danielle Wright said, her eyes still fixed on the empty space where the probe had been. "The Council's barriers only block normal space transit. They have no idea this dimension even exists." 3 days later, the leadership of the human colonies gathered in the underground chamber on Mars that had become humanity's de facto capital. The original bunker beneath Chicago had been expanded into a vast complex called New Hope Command. President Grace Wilson, elected just 6 months earlier, studied the reports before her. "So the phase drive works. The question now is, what do we do with it?" Colonel Ben Martinez, head of military intelligence, activated a holographic display. "We've been gathering information on Council activities through long-range sensors and automated probes. They've completely forgotten about us. Their patrol schedules near our sector have been reduced to almost nothing, which gives us an opportunity," Admiral Harper added. "We can start exploring beyond the barriers without detection. The phase drive doesn't leave energy signatures they can track." Danielle Wright gestured toward another section of the display. "My team has identified 17 star systems with resource deposits that could be harvested without alerting Council observers. If we move carefully, we can establish mining operations that will accelerate our industrial capacity tenfold." President Wilson considered this information. At 68, she had been a young diplomat during the exile judgment. She remembered the humiliation, the dismissal of humanity as barely evolved primates. "We proceed with extreme caution," she decided. "No contact with alien civilizations. Not yet. Dr. Garcia, how many phase drive ships can we construct in the next 5 years? With current resources, perhaps 20 small vessels. But with the additional materials Ms. Wright is proposing to harvest, we could build hundreds." Martinez spoke up again. "I propose a special division, the Shadow Fleet. Small, stealthy ships equipped with phase drives and cloaking technology. Their mission would be pure observation. We need to know what's happening in Council space." "Approved," Wilson said without hesitation. "Admiral Harper, you'll oversee the operation." Harper nodded, his aged face solemn. "I know just the officer to lead it. Commander Lily Chen has the right combination of caution and initiative." 6 months later, the first Shadow Fleet vessel slipped through phase space and emerged near Arconia, the homeworld of the species that had led the charge to exile humanity. The ship, named Phantom, was nearly invisible to conventional sensors, thanks to advanced stealth technology developed specifically for this mission. Commander Lily Chen watched the blue-green world through the Phantom's observation systems. "Recording all transmissions. Let's move into a higher orbit to capture their news and entertainment broadcasts." Her crew worked in focused silence. They had trained for this mission in total secrecy, aware that they were making history. The first humans to see alien civilization in 2 decades. What they discovered shocked them all. "This can't be right," Lieutenant Ryan Foster said, analyzing the data. "According to these broadcasts, they're using the same basic technology they had when they exiled us. 20 years, and they've made almost no advancements." Lily frowned. "Verify that. Check multiple sources." After 3 days in orbit, the truth became undeniable. The mighty Arconian civilization, which had presented itself as vastly superior to humanity, had stagnated. Their technology had plateaued centuries ago. The improvements they did make were incremental at best. "They lied to us," Lily said during their final observation day. "Or perhaps they lied to themselves." They're not gods. They're just stuck. When the Phantom returned to human space, its data caused a sensation among the scientific community. The Council races had enjoyed thousands of years of technological dominance, but that dominance had bred complacency. Cultural taboos against certain types of research, combined with rigid thinking patterns, had locked them into narrow development paths. Meanwhile, in just 20 years of isolation, humanity had already developed technology that the Council would consider impossible. At the New Horizon colony, the largest human settlement outside the solar system, Danielle Wright stood in her newly completed fabrication facility. Around her, automated systems converted raw materials from 3 nearby asteroid belts into components for more phase drive ships. Production capacity has exceeded projections by 30%, her assistant reported. At current rates, we'll meet the 5-year goal in just 3.5 years. Danielle nodded with satisfaction. When the aliens had confined humanity to worthless space, they hadn't understood human ingenuity. Where Council races saw barren rocks, she saw resources waiting to be tapped using methods they had never considered. On Earth, Alan Garcia met with President Wilson in the gardens outside the restored White House. Spring flowers bloomed around them, a reminder of the planet they were working to protect and advance. The phase drive was just the beginning, he explained, showing her plans on his tablet. Now that we understand the principles, we can apply them to other technologies, communications, sensors, even weapon systems. Wilson studied the designs. And the Council would have no defense against this? None, Garcia confirmed. They don't even know it's possible. It's like we're playing a completely different game than they are. The president looked up at the blue sky, somewhere beyond which lay the quantum barriers meant to keep humanity contained. How long before we're ready to go beyond observation? How long until we're ready to build our own empire out there? Garcia thought about the rapid progress of the past 5 years, the innovations emerging daily from labs and workshops across human space. At our current rate of advancement? Give us another 50 years. They won't know what hit them. 50 years had passed since humanity's exile. What had begun as a handful of colonies struggling for survival had grown into a vast network of hidden worlds and stations. The phase drive technology had advanced beyond what even Alan Garcia had imagined possible. Fleet Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the observation deck of Prometheus Station, watching through the massive viewport as construction drones worked on the hull of yet another warship. The station itself was humanity's greatest achievement, a massive structure hidden within the dense gases of the Carina Nebula, far beyond the quantum barriers that the Council still maintained around human space. Admiral, the Council representatives are passing checkpoint Sigma, her aide reported. Sullivan nodded. She had risen through the ranks of the Shadow Fleet to become the highest military authority in human space. At 53, her red hair was streaked with gray, her face bearing the subtle marks of someone who had spent much of her life in low-gravity environments. "Are our observers in place?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. We have eyes on the Council chamber. The meeting is set to begin in 30 minutes. Sullivan smoothed her uniform. The Council had no idea that this meeting, where they would once again discuss the human containment situation, was being monitored by humans themselves. Genetically modified operatives, surgically altered to pass as various alien species, had been integrated into Council society over the past 2 decades. What had begun as a simple intelligence operation under Colonel Martinez had evolved into something far more complex. Through the nebula's swirling colors, she could see the outline of what would become the flagship of humanity's newest fleet. Unlike the stealthy Shadow Fleet vessels, these were warships, powerful, heavily armed, and capable of standing against anything the Council could deploy. "Not that they will ever see them coming," she murmured to herself. On the frontier world of Liberty's Edge, Governor Peter Daniels reviewed reports from the growing network of human agents throughout Council space. What had begun as passive observation had evolved into active infiltration. Humans now worked as merchants, technicians, and even low-level bureaucrats throughout the Galactic Council's territory. "Our trading company on Centauri Prime has increased profits by 30%, his assistant noted. "Council merchants have no idea they're dealing with human-owned businesses." Daniels nodded, his dark eyes scanning the data. At 67, he had spent most of his adult life coordinating the covert integration project. His office overlooked the sprawling city that had grown from nothing on this once barren world. Beyond the city limits, terraforming projects were transforming the planet's ecosystem. "And our technology exports?" he asked. "Selling well, sir. We're careful to maintain the appearance of being 5 to 10 years behind their current levels. Nothing to raise suspicions. In reality, human technology had surpassed council standards decades ago. The goods sold through their front companies were deliberately downgraded to avoid attention. The real advances, phase drive systems, gravity, manipulation technology, and true artificial intelligence, remained exclusive to human space. The Council's annual review of the human quarantine is today, Daniels remarked. I wonder if they still think we're confined to Earth and a few struggling colonies. His assistant smiled. According to our sources, they barely discuss us anymore. Some younger council members don't even remember why the barriers were established. Good, Daniel said. The less attention we receive, the better. In a secure laboratory beneath the mountains of New Terra, Dr. Alan Garcia, now elderly with wispy white hair, supervised the final tests of his latest breakthrough. Despite his age, his mind remained sharp, his eyes bright behind old-fashioned glasses. Initiate the gravity field, he instructed his team of younger scientists. In the center of the testing chamber, a large metal sphere began to rise, defying the planet's gravitational pull. But unlike traditional anti-gravity technology that required massive energy inputs, this system created its own contained gravitational field, a fundamental rewriting of what Council science considered possible. Containment stable, reported Dr. Nora West, Garcia's most promising student. Field, integrity at 100%. Garcia nodded, satisfaction evident on his lined face. Progress is good. With this technology, we can build structures that would be impossible under normal conditions. We could create habitats inside gas giants, mining facilities within stars. The Council scientists claim this is theoretically impossible. Nora said, checking the readings. Garcia chuckled. The Council has been saying that about human accomplishments for 50 years. Their scientific paradigm is too rigid. They can't see beyond their established models. Across human space, the artificial intelligence known as Eden monitored millions of data streams simultaneously. Unlike the limited AI assistants used by Council races, Eden was a true sentient entity. Partner rather than tool, collaborator rather than servant. Analysis complete, Eden announced to the Leadership Council gathered in the secure chamber beneath New Hope. Based on all available data, I estimate that human technological development now exceeds Council standards by approximately 70 years in propulsion systems, 53 years in materials science, and 98 years in computing technology. The year. Holographic representation of Eden, a simple geometric pattern of light, pulsed as it spoke. By design, it had no humanoid avatar. The creators had wanted to emphasize its unique nature, not mimic humanity. President Victor Reyes VII, leader since humanity's exile, leaned forward. And our territorial expansion? Human-controlled or influenced territory now comprises approximately 26% of the galaxy, Eden responded. This includes 342 fully settled worlds, 718 mining outposts, and 1,200 forward observation posts, all undetected by Council monitoring systems. The Leadership Council, military, scientific, and political leaders from across human space, exchanged glances of satisfaction. What had begun as exile had transformed into the greatest expansion in human history. The phase-gate network is now operational between all major systems, Eden continued. Travel time between Earth and our furthest colony has been reduced to under 14 hours. Admiral Sullivan spoke up. And military readiness? The combined fleets now include over 5,000 vessels of various classes. Conservative projections indicate this force could overcome Council defenses within 72 hours if deployed strategically. President Reyes raised his hand. Let's be clear. We are not planning an offensive against the Council. Our policy remains non-confrontational expansion. We build our strength not for revenge but for security. Nods around the table acknowledge this long-standing position. Despite the injustice of their exile, humanity had chosen a path of quiet growth rather than open conflict. There is, however, a development that requires attention, Eden added. Our deep space monitoring systems have detected unusual energy signatures from beyond the galactic rim. The pattern does not match any known Council technology. Sullivan frowned. First contact with a new species? Uncertain, Eden replied. But the signatures suggest vessels of significant size and power, moving toward Council space at high velocity. President Reyes looked around the table. Increase long-range monitoring. If there's something coming from beyond the rim, we need to know what it is before it reaches Council territory, or ours. As the meeting concluded, Admiral Sullivan returned to Prometheus Station. Standing once again at the viewport, she watched as the newly completed warship ignited its engines for the first time. Its name was painted on the hull in bold letters. Defiance. Fitting, she murmured, unaware that this vessel would soon play a pivotal role in events that would forever change humanity's place in the galaxy. 100 years after humanity's exile, the galaxy faced an unprecedented crisis. The mysterious energy signatures detected by Eden had materialized into the most terrible threat the known universe had ever encountered, the void hegemony. On the observation deck of the Defiance, Captain Frank Mitchell watched the real-time feeds from Council space. Planet after planet fell to the invaders, their defenses crumbling like paper against the hegemony's weapons. The aliens from beyond the galactic rim used living ships, vast biological constructs that seemed to absorb energy weapons and heal from physical damage. Status report, Mitchell ordered, his voice calm despite the horror unfolding on the screens. His executive officer, Commander Helen Davis, stepped forward. Her dark skin contrasted with the white of her uniform as she activated a holographic display in the center of the deck. The Arconian homeworld is under direct assault, she reported. Their orbital defenses have been breached. Planetary shields are failing. Civilian casualties are estimated at 3 million and climbing. Mitchell's jaw tightened. The Arconians, the very species that had led the charge to exile humanity, were now facing extinction. For 3 months, the void hegemony had torn through Council space like a scythe, leaving dead worlds and shattered fleets in their wake. And the Council's response? Fragmented. Some species are attempting to form a unified defense. Others are retreating to their core systems. There's no coordinated strategy. Mitchell nodded. The Council, so proud and dismissive a century ago, had grown soft in their complacency. They had not faced a true threat in thousands of years. Now, when confronted with an enemy that did not follow their rules of warfare, they were falling apart. What about our stealth observers? Are they still in position? Davis nodded. Yes, sir, we have eyes in the Council's emergency session. They're desperate. The main screen shifted to show the Council chamber. Unlike the dignified, orderly meetings of the past, this was chaos. Representatives shouted over one another, some weeping openly, others making accusations of cowardice and abandonment. In the center stood High Arbiter Krell Knox, an Arconian whose scaled skin had faded to pale blue with age. His voice rose above the din. We must consider all options for survival, he declared. Even seeking aid from the humans. The chamber fell silent. For most Council members, humans were barely more than a historical footnote, a minor species quarantined long ago, and presumably struggling to survive in their isolated corner of space. The humans, a Zilarian representative scoffed. If they still exist, what could they possibly offer? Their technology was primitive when we contained them. Krellnox's 4 eyes blinked slowly. Perhaps, but they were innovative, adaptable, qualities we may need. As the debate continued, Mitchell muted the feed and turned to his senior staff. The President is waiting for our assessment. Opinions? The ship's chief science officer, Dr. Linda Patel, spoke first. The void hegemony's Attack pattern isn't random. They're systematically eliminating defense systems in a direct path toward Earth. Somehow they know about us. The real us. Not just the quarantined colonies the Council thinks we have. Mitchell frowned. How is that possible? We've maintained complete stealth for a century. Unknown, Eden's voice answered through the ship's communication system. But analysis of their technology suggests capabilities we haven't encountered before. They may be able to detect phase drive signatures. The implications were chilling. If the hegemony could track phase drive technology, they could potentially locate every human settlement, installation, and ship throughout the galaxy. On Earth, President Lisa Chen sat in the ancient chamber beneath New Hope that had served as humanity's secret command center for a century. The wood-paneled walls had been replaced with advanced materials, but the room retained its historical significance. This was where humanity had first decided to defy their exile and build a hidden empire. The situation continues to deteriorate, Admiral Sullivan reported via holographic projection. Now in her 70s, she remained the highest military authority in human space. The Council has lost 17 major systems. The Arconian homeworld will fall within 24 hours. Chen nodded, her expression grave. And the void hegemony's trajectory? Eden's analysis confirms it. They're moving toward our space. Not the quarantine zone, but our actual territory. They know we're here. Around the table sat the Shadow Cabinet, 12 men and women who represented the true extent of human civilization. Unlike the public government that officially administered the quarantine zone, these leaders guided the vast hidden empire that now spanned nearly half the galaxy. We face a choice, Chen said quietly. We can remain hidden, allow the Council, races to fall, and then face the hegemony alone, or we can reveal ourselves now and join forces with the Council against this common threat. Secretary of Defense Aaron Kelly frowned. The Council exiled us, left us to die. Why should we help them now? Because this isn't about them, replied Foreign Affairs Director Maya Russo. The void hegemony is coming for us next. If we let the Council fall, we lose potential allies and resources for the coming fight. The debate continued for hours. A century of secrecy had shaped human policy. Revealing their true power would mean abandoning the strategy that had allowed them to build their empire undetected. Eden, Chen finally said, what are the projected casualties if the hegemony continues unchecked? The AI's voice was calm, but the numbers it provided were staggering. If current trends continue, and assuming the hegemony's intent is conquest, rather than coexistence, total deaths could reach into the trillions across all species, including humans. A heavy silence fell over the room. We didn't build our civilization just to watch it burn, Chen said at last. Nor did we overcome our exile to become exilers ourselves, abandoning others to their fate. She looked around the table. I've made my decision. Admiral Sullivan, deploy the First Fleet to Arconian space. Captain Mitchell and the Defiance will make first contact with the Council. As orders went out across human space, ships began emerging from hidden docks and phase gates. For the first time in a century, humanity prepared to step onto the galactic stage openly. Aboard the Defiance, Captain Mitchell received his new orders, with a mixture of pride and trepidation. His ship, the most advanced vessel humans had ever built, would be the first to reveal itself to the Council. Plot a course for Arconia, he ordered. Prepare for phase jump. Commander Davis hesitated. Sir, once we deactivate our cloaking systems, there's no going back. A century of secrecy ends the moment we appear in their space. Mitchell nodded, his eyes on the tactical display showing Arconian ships falling before the hegemony's assault. Sometimes, the best-kept secrets are the ones revealed at exactly the right moment, he said. Engage phase drive. Let's show the galaxy what humanity has become. The Arconian homeworld burned. Orbital defense platforms exploded in silent bursts of fire as the void hegemony's living ships tore through the planet's last line of protection. On the surface, millions fled to underground shelters while the sky turned black with smoke and debris. High Arbiter Krelnok stood in the ancient council chamber beneath the capital city, surrounded by the remaining government officials. The building shook as another bombardment struck nearby. The evacuation. Ships are overwhelmed, a military officer reported, his scales pale with fear. We estimate less than 10% of the population can be evacuated before the planetary shields fail completely. Krell closed his 4 eyes briefly. After thousands of years of dominance, the mighty Arconian civilization faced extinction in a matter of hours. Similar reports came from across council space, world after world falling to the unstoppable invaders. We have no choice but to surrender, one of the ministers suggested, voice trembling. The hegemony does not accept surrender, Krell replied. They have ignored all communication attempts. They simply consume. A young officer burst into the chamber. High Arbiter, unknown ships have appeared in orbit. Krell felt a fresh wave of despair. More hegemony forces? No, sir. They're engaging the hegemony vessels. And winning. Screens around the chamber activated, showing footage from the remaining orbital cameras. What they revealed left the gathered Arconians speechless. A massive warship, unlike any design the Council had ever seen, had appeared seemingly from nowhere directly above the capital. Flanking it were hundreds of smaller vessels, moving with impossible precision. Energy weapons of extraordinary power lanced from the ships, cutting through the hegemony's living vessels with ease. Who are they? Krell whispered. His question was answered moments later when all communication channels in the system activated simultaneously. The face that appeared on the screens was unmistakably human. This is Captain Frank Mitchell of the Earth vessel Defiance to all Arconian forces. We are engaging the hegemony. Direct your civilian ships to the coordinates we're transmitting. We will provide cover for your evacuation. Stunned silence filled the chamber. Humans, the supposedly primitive species they had exiled a century ago, had returned with technology that outmatched anything the Council races possessed. In orbit, the Defiance led the human fleet in a perfectly coordinated attack. The ship's phase drive allowed it to jump instantaneously from one position to another, appearing behind hegemony vessels and unleashing devastating weapons fire before vanishing again. On the bridge, Captain Mitchell watched the tactical display with focused intensity. Focus fire on the hegemony command ship. All phase-capable vessels execute pattern Delta. Around the massive vessel, smaller human ships blinked in and out of normal space, attacking from multiple dimensions simultaneously. A tactic the hegemony could not counter. Arconian evacuation ships are moving to the safe corridor, Commander Helen Davis reported. First wave has cleared the gravity well, Mitchell nodded. Maintain defensive positions and prepare my shuttle. I'm going to the surface. Sir? Davis questioned. President Chen wants direct contact with the Council leadership. I've been authorized to bring High Arbiter Krell aboard the Defiance. An hour later, Mitchell's shuttle landed in the central plaza of the Arconian capital. Buildings burned around the landing zone, and occasional explosions still shook the ground as fighting continued in orbit. A squad of human marines in advanced combat armor secured the area as Mitchell stepped onto alien soil. A delegation of Arconians approached, led by an elderly figure Mitchell recognized from intelligence briefings as Krell himself. You're human, the High Arbiter stated, his voice a mixture of disbelief and something close to awe. Mitchell nodded. Yes, I've been authorized to offer you passage to our command ship. President Chen wishes to discuss a joint response to the hegemony threat. President Chen, Krell repeated slowly. Your leader? One of them, Mitchell replied with a slight smile. As they boarded the shuttle, Krell stared through the viewport at the human marines. Their weapons and armor were, unlike anything the Council had developed, more advanced, more elegant in design. We believed your species would have barely survived in isolation, the Arconian admitted, perhaps struggling to maintain a few colonies. Mitchell's smile widened. We did a bit more than survive, High Arbiter. This became abundantly clear when the shuttle docked with the Defiance. The ship's interior revealed technology centuries beyond what the Council races possessed. As they walked through gleaming corridors of advanced materials, Krell Knox noticed something else. Subtle signs that this vessel, impressive as it was, represented only a fraction of human capability. "How many worlds do your people inhabit now?" he asked carefully. "That information will be shared in the briefing," Mitchell replied diplomatically. In the Defiance's conference room, a holographic projection of President Lisa Chen awaited them. Behind her, subtly visible, was a view of Earth, beautiful, blue, and clearly thriving. "High Arbiter Krell Knox," she greeted. "A century ago, your people led the effort to exile mine to a small corner of the galaxy. Today, we offer assistance against a common enemy." The Arconian bowed his head slightly. "The circumstances are not what any of us expected." "Indeed," Chen agreed. "Captain Mitchell will brief you on our analysis of the Void hegemony and our proposed strategy." Mitchell activated the room's holographic systems, displaying a galaxy map that caused Krell Knox's eyes to widen in shock. Human territory, marked in blue, covered nearly half the known galaxy, far beyond the quarantine zone the Council had established. "For the past century, we've built our civilization in secret," Mitchell explained. "We developed technologies your scientists considered impossible. We expanded to systems you thought uninhabitable." Krell Knox stared at the map. "How did we not detect this?" "The phase drive," Mitchell said simply. "It allows travel through dimensions your sensors can't monitor. But now the hegemony has somehow detected our presence. They're not just attacking the Council, they're coming for Earth." The briefing continued, revealing the full extent of human advancement and their plan to combine forces against the hegemony. As details were exchanged, more human ships arrived in Arconian space, driving back the invaders and evacuating civilians. 3 days later, a combined fleet of human and Council vessels prepared for a decisive battle. Scientists from both civilizations had worked frantically to develop a weapon that could seal the dimensional rift the hegemony used to enter the galaxy. On the bridge of the Defiance, now designated the flagship of this unified force, Captain Mitchell reviewed the final battle plan. "The weapon must be deployed at the exact coordinates of the rift," he explained to the mixed crew of humans and Council representatives. "Our phase drive technology, combined with Arconian energy systems, will create a resonance field that should collapse the rift permanently." What he didn't mention was the cost. The weapon would destroy any ship that deployed it. He had volunteered the Defiance for this final mission. As the fleet engaged the main hegemony force, the Defiance slipped behind enemy lines, its phase drive, allowing it to approach the dimensional rift undetected. Aboard the ship, Mitchell ordered all non-essential personnel to escape pods. "It has been an honor," he told Commander Davis as she reluctantly prepared to evacuate. "Make sure history records what happened here today." Alone on the bridge, Mitchell guided the Defiance directly into the swirling vortex of the rift. As alarms blared around him, he activated the resonance weapon. Energy surged through the ship, tearing it apart even as the rift began to collapse. His last words, transmitted to both human and Council ships, were simple. "Remember that we stood together." 1 month later, representatives from all known species gathered on Earth, once a forbidden planet, now acknowledged as the seat of the most powerful civilization in the galaxy. The signing of the new Galactic Charter marked the official end of humanity's exile and the beginning of a new era of cooperation. High Arbiter Krell Knox, standing in the rebuilt United Nations Plaza, where the exile had been pronounced a century earlier, addressed the assembled delegates. "We once sought to contain humanity, fearing their potential. In doing so, we freed them to become something greater than we could imagine. Today, we humbly acknowledge their rightful place among the stars, not as subjects but as leaders." President Chen accepted the charter with a solemn nod. As the ceremony concluded, she opened a small book, the handwritten journal of Dr. Olivia Palmer, preserved through the decades. "They thought they sentenced us to irrelevance," she read aloud. "They actually set us free." Above, visible through the transparent dome of the new Galactic Assembly Building, stars shimmered in the night sky, no longer distant points of light, but the illuminated paths of humanity's future.